Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other recruits at Fort Jackson. While her fellow soldiers came from military families or had dreamed of combat since childhood, she had joined the Army to pay for college. Her small frame and quiet demeanor made her an easy target for the jokes that echoed through the barracks every night. The morning sun cast long shadows across the firing range as Sergeant Williams barked orders at the assembled recruits. Sarah stood in the back row, her M16 rifle feeling heavy in her small hands. She had been at basic training for 6 weeks now, and every trip to the range brought the same humiliation. "Martinez, step up to the line," Sergeant Williams called out, his voice carrying across the range like thunder. Sarah walked forward, feeling the eyes of her fellow recruits burning into her back. She could already hear the whispered comments starting behind her. Private Johnson, a tall farm boy from Texas, was the loudest of her tormentors. "Watch this, guys," Johnson whispered to his buddies. "Little Sarah's gonna miss the target again. I bet she can't even see it from here." The other recruits snickered quietly. Private Davis, who had grown up hunting with his father, shook his head in mock disappointment. "My little sister shoots better than her, and she's only 12 years old." Sarah tried to block out their words as she got into position. She had been practicing the stance over and over in her mind, but when she actually held the rifle, everything felt wrong. Her breathing was uneven, her hands shook slightly, and the target seemed impossibly far away. "Take your time, Martinez," Sergeant Williams said, though his tone suggested his patience was running thin. "Remember what we practiced. Breathe in, breathe out, squeeze the trigger gently." Sarah nodded and tried to focus. She lined up the sights with the target, a standard military silhouette placed 50 meters away. The rifle felt alien in her hands, nothing like the textbooks she was used to studying. She had never held a gun before joining the Army, unlike most of her fellow recruits who had been hunting since they were children. The first shot rang out, echoing across the range. Sarah felt the rifle kick against her shoulder, and she immediately knew she had missed. The target remained untouched, and she heard the familiar sound of suppressed laughter behind her. "Wide left," called the range instructor through his binoculars. "Try again, Martinez." Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment as she repositioned herself. The second shot was no better, sailing high over the target. By the third shot, which hit the dirt several feet in front of the target, the comments from her fellow recruits were no longer whispered. "Come on, Martinez," Johnson called out loudly. "Even my grandmother could hit that target, and she's been dead for 5 years." The entire group erupted in laughter. Even some of the quieter recruits couldn't help but smile at the joke. Sarah felt tears threatening to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "That's enough," Sergeant Williams shouted, silencing the group immediately. "Martinez, step back. Johnson, you're up next." As Sarah walked back to the group, she could feel the mixture of pity and amusement in their stares. Johnson strutted past her with a confident grin, making sure to bump her shoulder as he passed. "Move aside, college girl," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let me show you how it's done." Johnson took his position with the casual confidence of someone who had been shooting since childhood. His first shot hit the target dead center, earning approving nods from the instructors and cheers from his fellow recruits. His next 4 shots were equally impressive, grouping tightly around the center of the target. "Now that's how you shoot," Johnson announced as he turned back to the group, basking in the applause. "Maybe Martinez should stick to books instead of bullets." The laughter that followed was the loudest yet. Sarah stood at the back of the group, feeling smaller than ever. She had joined the Army to serve her country and earn money for her education. But every day felt like a battle just to maintain her dignity. Davis stepped up next and performed almost as well as Johnson, followed by several other recruits who all managed to hit the target consistently. Each successful shot felt like another reminder of Sarah's failure. She began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake in enlisting. During the lunch break, Sarah sat alone at the end of a long table in the mess hall, picking at her meal while trying to ignore the conversations happening around her. The other recruits had formed their own little groups, sharing stories and jokes while she remained an outsider. "I heard Martinez is thinking about quitting," she overheard Johnson saying to his table of friends. "Probably for the best. Can't have someone who can't shoot watching our backs in combat." "She should have stayed in school," Davis added. "War isn't a place for people who are afraid of guns." Sarah wanted to stand up and tell them that she wasn't afraid, just inexperienced. She wanted to explain that not everyone had grown up with firearms, that some people needed more time to learn, but she knew it would only make things worse. So she continued eating in silence. That evening, as the other recruits gathered in the common area to play cards and share stories from home, Sarah retreated to her bunk. She pulled out a notebook and began writing a letter to her mother, trying to find words to describe her situation without admitting how difficult things had become. Her bunkmate, Private Rodriguez, was one of the few recruits who hadn't actively joined in mocking her, though she hadn't offered any support either. As Rodriguez prepared for bed, she glanced over at Sarah writing her letter. "You know," Rodriguez said quietly, "my cousin had trouble with shooting when she first joined the Marines. She said it took her months to get good at it." Sarah looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "What happened to her?" "She became one of the best marksmen in her unit," Rodriguez replied. "But she had to practice every chance she got. Extra time on the range, studying techniques, asking instructors for help after hours." Rodriguez climbed into her bunk and turned off her light, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. The suggestion of extra practice time sparked something in her mind. Maybe she didn't have to accept being the worst shooter in the group. Maybe she could find a way to improve, even if it meant sacrificing her free time and enduring more ridicule in the process. As the barracks settled into the quiet sounds of sleeping soldiers, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would not let their mockery define her. She would find a way to prove herself, no matter how long it took or how much extra work it required. She had no idea that this determination would soon be tested in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, Sarah approached Sergeant Williams after the regular training session had ended. Most of the other recruits had hurried off to the mess hall for lunch, their stomachs growling and their minds already focused on the afternoon's activities. Sarah's heart pounded as she walked toward the gruff instructor who was cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. "Sergeant Williams, sir," she said, standing at attention. "I request permission to spend additional time on the firing range." Williams looked up from his weapon, his weathered face showing surprise. In his 15 years of training recruits, few had ever voluntarily asked for extra shooting practice, especially those who struggled the most. "Martinez, you understand that means giving up your free time? No more relaxing in the barracks? No more letters home during break periods?" "Yes, sir. I understand completely." Williams studied her face carefully, looking for any sign that this was just a momentary burst of motivation that would fade by the next day. What he saw instead was a quiet determination that reminded him of his own early days in the Army. "All right, Martinez. Meet me here every day at 1500 hours. We'll work on your fundamentals until you can at least hit the target consistently. But I warn you, I don't have patience for quitters. If you show up, you better be ready to work." "Thank you, sir. I'll be here." That afternoon, while her fellow recruits enjoyed their free time playing cards and writing letters home, Sarah returned to the firing range. Sergeant Williams was waiting with a rifle and several boxes of ammunition. "Before we start shooting, we're going to break down everything you think you know about marksmanship," Williams said. "Most recruits come in with bad habits from video games or movies. We need to start from the very beginning." For the next 2 hours, Williams worked with Sarah on the most basic fundamentals. He showed her how to properly hold the rifle, how to align the sights, and most importantly, how to control her breathing and heartbeat. Sarah had never realized how much her body's natural rhythms affected her ability to shoot accurately. "Your biggest problem isn't your aim," Williams explained as he watched her practice the shooting position without ammunition. "It's your confidence. You're so worried about missing that you're tensing up before you even pull the trigger. A scared shooter is always a poor shooter." Sarah nodded, absorbing every word. She had never thought about the mental aspect of marksmanship. In her mind, shooting had always been a purely physical skill, like learning to ride a bicycle or throw a ball. "Now, we're going to start with dry firing," Williams continued. "That means pulling the trigger without ammunition. I want you to practice your breathing and trigger control 50 times before we load a single bullet." The exercises were tedious and repetitive, but Sarah forced herself to focus on each movement. Williams corrected her posture dozens of times, adjusted her grip, and made her repeat the breathing exercises until they became automatic. When they finally loaded the rifle and moved to live firing, Sarah's first shot still missed the target. But Williams seemed pleased rather than disappointed. "Better," he said simply. "Your form was correct that time. The miss was just inexperience, not fundamental errors. Try again." Sarah's second shot grazed the edge of the target, her first hit ever. She looked up at Williams with excitement, but he simply nodded and pointed back at the target. Don't celebrate yet, Martinez. One lucky shot doesn't make you a marksman. We need consistency. By the end of the session, Sarah had managed to hit the target 3 out of 10 times. It wasn't impressive by military standards, but it was progress. As they cleaned the rifles together, Williams offered his first piece of encouragement. You've got good focus, Martinez. Most recruits get frustrated and start rushing their shots. You're patient enough to learn properly. Sarah returned to the barracks that evening feeling exhausted but hopeful. The other recruits barely looked up from their activities as she entered. Johnson was in the middle of telling a story about his high school football career, his voice loud enough to fill the entire room. So there I was, fourth quarter, down by 3 points. Johnson was saying, Coach calls the play and I know it's all up to me. The whole team, the whole school, counting on old reliable Johnson to save the day. Sarah tried to ignore the story as she prepared for bed, but Johnson's voice seemed to follow her everywhere. She had heard variations of this same story at least a dozen times, each telling more dramatic than the last. The next day, during regular shooting practice, Sarah's performance was noticeably improved. She managed to hit the target on her second shot, drawing surprised looks from the other recruits. Johnson, who was watching from the back of the group, made a loud comment about beginner's luck. Don't get too excited, Martinez, he called out. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But Sarah barely heard him. She was focused entirely on Williams's instructions, remembering the lessons from their private practice session. Her next 3 shots all found the target, and while they weren't clustered in the center like Johnson's shots, they were clear hits. Sergeant Williams said nothing during the regular session, maintaining his professional demeanor in front of the group. But Sarah caught him making small notes in his record book, and she was pretty sure they were positive marks next to her name. After lunch, Sarah continued her private practice sessions with Williams. Day after day, she returned to the range while the other recruits relaxed. Her shooting improved steadily, and Williams began introducing more advanced techniques. Today we're going to work on shooting from different positions, Williams announced during their 4th private session. Combat doesn't always give you the luxury of shooting from a comfortable prone position. He taught her to shoot while kneeling, standing, and even while moving between positions. Each new challenge brought fresh difficulties, but Sarah approached each one with the same patient determination that had marked her initial improvement. Rodriguez began to notice the changes in Sarah's behavior and performance. During one evening conversation, she asked Sarah about her improvements. You've been shooting better lately, Rodriguez observed. Are you getting extra help from somewhere? Sarah hesitated, unsure whether admitting to extra practice would make her seem weak or desperate. Finally, she decided to be honest. Sergeant Williams has been working with me after hours. I asked him if I could get additional training. Rodriguez looked impressed rather than amused. That takes guts. Most people would just accept being bad at it and hope they never need those skills. I can't accept that, Sarah replied. If I'm going to be a soldier, I need to be able to do the job properly. Word of Sarah's extra practice sessions slowly spread through the barracks, though most of the other recruits remained skeptical about her progress. Johnson, in particular, seemed determined to maintain his role as the best shooter in the group. So Martinez is getting special treatment now, he said loudly during one evening gathering. Maybe if the rest of us cried enough, we'd get private lessons too. But even Johnson couldn't deny that Sarah's scores were improving week by week. During the next group evaluation, Sarah placed in the middle of the group rather than dead last. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was undeniable progress that caught everyone's attention. 3 months into basic training, Sarah's transformation was becoming impossible to ignore. Her daily practice sessions with Sergeant Williams had evolved from basic marksmanship into advanced combat shooting techniques. She could now consistently hit targets at various distances and had mastered shooting from multiple positions under time pressure. The change wasn't just in her shooting skills. Sarah carried herself differently now, with a quiet confidence that replaced her earlier uncertainty. She no longer flinched when handling her rifle, and her movements during weapons training had become smooth and automatic. During a particularly challenging training exercise, the recruits were required to navigate an obstacle course while carrying full combat gear, then immediately transition to precision shooting at the end. It was designed to test their ability. to maintain accuracy while physically stressed and mentally fatigued. Johnson, as usual, was the first to volunteer for the exercise. He attacked the obstacle course with his typical aggressive energy, climbing over walls and crawling under barriers with impressive speed. When he reached the shooting station, he was breathing heavily but still managed to hit 7 out of 10 targets. "Beat that," he called out to the group, his chest heaving from exertion. "Let's see who thinks they can do better than the Johnson special." Several other recruits followed, with most achieving scores between 5 and 8 hits. The physical demands of the obstacle course clearly affected everyone's shooting accuracy, just as the exercise was designed to do. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the obstacle course with methodical precision rather than Johnson's raw speed. She had learned from Williams that conservation of energy was just as important as physical fitness in combat situations. "Look at Martinez taking her sweet time," Davis commented to his friends. "Probably afraid she'll break a nail on the obstacles." Sarah ignored the comment and focused on navigating each obstacle efficiently. She moved steadily, but not frantically, maintaining her breathing rhythm and keeping her heart rate as controlled as possible. The other recruits watched with growing interest as she completed the course in a respectable time without appearing exhausted. At the shooting station, Sarah took a moment to regulate her breathing before picking up her rifle. The movements she had practiced thousands of times during her extra sessions kicked in automatically. Sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze. Everything flowed together seamlessly. Her first shot hit the center ring of the target. The second shot was equally precise. By her fifth shot, even Johnson had stopped joking and was watching intently. Sarah's concentration was absolute, blocking out everything except the target in front of her. When the smoke cleared and the targets were checked, Sarah had achieved a perfect score, 10 hits out of 10 attempts. The range fell silent for a moment as the instructor announced the results. "Martinez, perfect score," Sergeant Williams called out, his voice carrying a note of pride that he usually reserved for the most exceptional performances. The reaction from her fellow recruits was immediate and varied. Some looked genuinely impressed. Others appeared shocked, and a few seemed almost angry that their previous assumptions had been proven wrong so dramatically. Johnson was the first to speak, though his usual confidence was noticeably shaken. "Lucky day, I guess. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes." But Rodriguez and several other recruits weren't buying Johnson's dismissive explanation. Sarah's performance had been too controlled and precise to be attributed to luck. They had witnessed a level of skill that most of them couldn't match even on their best days. "That wasn't luck," Rodriguez said quietly to the group around her. "That was real shooting skill." Word of Sarah's perfect score spread quickly through the training company. By dinner time, soldiers from other platoons were asking about the recruit who had outshot everyone in her group. Some of the stories grew in the telling, with Sarah's achievement becoming more impressive with each retelling. In the mess hall that evening, Sarah found herself in an unusual position. Instead of sitting alone at the end of a table, several recruits approached her wanting to know how she had improved so dramatically. "Is it true you've been practicing extra hours every day?" asked Private Thompson, one of the quieter members of their group. Sarah nodded, unsure how much detail to share. "Sergeant Williams has been helping me work on fundamentals and advanced techniques." "Could you show us some of what you've learned?" Thompson continued. "Some of us could use the help too." Before Sarah could answer, Johnson's voice cut across the conversation from the next table. "Don't waste your time asking Martinez for advice. One good day doesn't make her an expert. Tomorrow she'll be back to missing targets like usual." But Johnson's words carried less conviction than before. Even he seemed to realize that Sarah's performance had been too consistent and controlled to dismiss as a fluke. Over the next few days, Sarah's shooting continued to improve. During group exercises, she consistently scored in the top 3, often outperforming recruits who had been mocking her just weeks earlier. Her success created a noticeable shift in the group dynamics. Some recruits, like Rodriguez and Thompson, began treating Sarah with genuine respect and occasionally asked for shooting advice. Others, particularly Johnson and his closest friends, seemed increasingly frustrated by her success and doubled down on their criticism. "Must be nice getting special treatment," Johnson commented loudly during one training session. The rest of us have to learn the hard way while Martinez gets private tutoring." Sergeant Williams overheard the comment and decided to address it directly. "Johnson, Martinez requested additional training and has put in extra work every single day for months. That's not special treatment, that's dedication. If you want additional practice time, my door is open." Johnson fell silent, clearly unprepared for Williams's response. The offer of additional training hung in the air, but Johnson made no move to accept it. Like many people who complained about others' success, he was unwilling to put in the extra effort required to achieve similar results. Sarah's confidence continued to grow with each successful training session. She began speaking up more during tactical discussions and offered suggestions during group exercises. The same quiet determination that had driven her to seek extra shooting practice was now evident in all aspects of her military training. During a night navigation exercise, Sarah's map reading skills and attention to detail helped her team complete the course faster than any other group. Her methodical approach, which had once been seen as a weakness, was now proving valuable in situations that required precision and careful planning. "Martinez saved our butts out there," Thompson admitted after the exercise. "I was completely lost after the third checkpoint, but she knew exactly where we were the whole time." Even some of Johnson's supporters were beginning to notice Sarah's contributions. Private Davis, who had been one of her earliest critics, found himself working with Sarah during a team-building exercise and was surprised by her competence and leadership abilities. "You know," Davis said quietly to Sarah during a break in training, "I might have been wrong about you when we first started. You've really stepped up your game." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement, though she noticed that Davis only offered it when Johnson wasn't around to hear. The social dynamics of the group were complex, with some recruits still afraid to openly support her for fear of becoming targets themselves. As their basic training program moved into its final phase, Sarah realized that her journey from the worst shooter in the group to one of the most skilled had taught her more than just marksmanship. She had learned the power of persistence, the importance of seeking help when needed, and the satisfaction that comes from proving wrong those who doubt your abilities. 2 years after graduating from basic training, Sergeant Sarah Martinez found herself deployed to a forward operating base in a conflict zone, where her unit provided security for humanitarian supply convoys. The scared recruit who had once struggled to hit targets at 50 meters was now a respected team leader, with advanced marksmanship certifications and combat experience. Her transformation hadn't gone unnoticed by her superiors. Captain Reynolds had specifically requested Sarah for this deployment after reviewing her training records and performance evaluations. Her combination of technical shooting skills and calm decision-making under pressure made her ideal for the complex security missions they faced daily. The forward operating base was located in a valley surrounded by hills that provided excellent vantage points for potential threats. Sarah's unit was responsible for a particularly dangerous section of road where supply convoys had been attacked multiple times in recent months. The local terrain made every mission a tactical challenge. Among the soldiers under Sarah's command was Private Johnson, the same recruit who had mocked her shooting abilities during basic training. Military assignments had a way of bringing people together in unexpected ways, and Johnson now found himself serving under the woman he had once dismissed as incompetent. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, though they both maintained professional military bearing. Johnson had matured during his years of service, and while he remained confident in his abilities, his earlier arrogance had been tempered by real combat experience. He still considered himself an excellent shooter, but he could no longer deny Sarah's superior skills and leadership abilities. "Sergeant Martinez," Johnson said, during one morning briefing, his tone respectful but carrying a hint of their old rivalry. "I've been reviewing the route for today's convoy escort. The section near Hill 247 still looks like our biggest vulnerability." Sarah studied the map he indicated, noting the elevated positions that could provide cover for hostile forces. "Good eye, Johnson. What do you recommend for overwatch positions?" "If we put 2 shooters on the ridgeline here," Johnson pointed to a spot on the map, "they could cover the entire danger zone. But it means splitting our forces and leaving the convoy with fewer direct escorts." Sarah considered the tactical trade-offs carefully. It was exactly the kind of complex decision that separated good soldiers from exceptional leaders. The mathematics of combat were unforgiving, Every choice carried risks that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "We'll take the Overwatch position," Sarah decided. "Johnson, you'll be primary shooter with Rodriguez as spotter. I want you in position 30 minutes before the convoy enters that section." Johnson nodded, accepting the assignment without question. Despite their history, he recognized Sarah's tactical expertise and trusted her judgment in combat situations. The petty conflicts of basic training seemed insignificant when lives were at stake. That afternoon, as the convoy prepared to depart, Sarah conducted her final equipment checks with methodical precision. Her rifle was a precision instrument that she maintained with the same dedication she had once applied to her extra shooting practice. Every component was cleaned, calibrated, and tested to ensure optimal performance. The convoy consisted of 6 vehicles carrying medical supplies and food for displaced civilians in a remote village. The humanitarian mission was exactly the kind of operation that made military service meaningful to Sarah, but it also presented significant tactical challenges. The slow-moving trucks were vulnerable targets, and the winding mountain road offered countless opportunities for ambush. Sarah positioned herself in the lead escort vehicle, where she could coordinate the movement of all security elements while maintaining visual contact with potential threat areas. Her radio crackled with regular check-ins from the Overwatch teams and flanking security units. "Overwatch 1, this is Alpha Leader," Sarah transmitted. "Report your status." "Alpha Leader, Overwatch 1 is in position and ready." Johnson's voice came back clear and professional. "We have eyes on the entire kill zone. No movement detected at this time." The convoy began its slow progress through the valley, maintaining careful spacing between vehicles to minimize the impact of any potential attack. Sarah's eyes constantly scanned the surrounding terrain, looking for anything that seemed out of place or suspicious. They were halfway through the danger zone when Rodriguez's urgent voice broke through the radio silence. "Alpha Leader, Overwatch 1. We have movement on the North Ridge. Multiple personnel with weapons approximately 800 meters from the convoy route." Sarah's training kicked in immediately. "All units, this is Alpha Leader. Possible contact North Ridge. Convoy halt and take defensive positions. Overwatch 1, can you confirm hostile intent?" "Alpha Leader, contacts are moving into firing positions with crew-served weapons." Definitely hostile. The situation was developing exactly as Sarah had feared. The convoy was trapped in the most vulnerable section of the route, with hostile forces occupying elevated positions that provided them with significant tactical advantages. The mathematics of the engagement were stark. The enemy held the high ground and had prepared positions, while her forces were exposed on the valley floor. "All units, prepare for contact," Sarah transmitted. Convoy drivers moved to cover behind those rock formations. "All security elements, establish defensive perimeter and prepare to engage." Through her binoculars, Sarah could see muzzle flashes beginning to appear on the ridgeline as the hostile forces opened fire. Bullets began impacting around the convoy vehicles, sending up small clouds of dust and debris. The distinctive crack of incoming rifle fire filled the air. "Overwatch 1, you are cleared to engage," Sarah ordered. "All other units, return fire and suppress enemy positions." Johnson's voice came back immediately. "Alpha Leader, engaging targets now." From her position with the convoy, Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of precision rifle fire from the Overwatch position. Johnson and Rodriguez were engaging the enemy shooters with careful, aimed shots rather than the rapid suppressive fire that characterized most of the defensive response. "Alpha Leader, Overwatch 1. Target down. Engaging second target." Sarah coordinated the defensive response while simultaneously calling for air support and requesting additional ground forces. The engagement was developing into exactly the kind of complex tactical situation that tested every aspect of military training and leadership. The enemy fire was becoming more accurate as the hostile forces adjusted their aim. Several convoy vehicles had taken hits, though the drivers had successfully moved to covered positions. Sarah realized that her forces needed to either eliminate the enemy positions quickly or find a way to extract the convoy from the kill zone. "Johnson, I need you to take out that crew-served weapon on the left side of the ridge," Sarah transmitted. "That's the biggest threat to the convoy right now." "Copy, Alpha Leader. I see the target. It's a long shot, but I've got a clear angle." Sarah held her breath as she waited for Johnson's shot. The distance was extreme, even for a skilled marksman, and the target was partially concealed behind rocky cover. Success would require the kind of precision shooting that separated good soldiers from exceptional ones. The sound of Johnson's rifle carried across the valley, followed by an explosion as the enemy weapon position erupted in flames. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see that the crew-served weapon had been destroyed and its operators eliminated. "Outstanding shot, Overwatch 1, Sarah transmitted. Continue engaging remaining targets." The destruction of the heavy weapon shifted the tactical balance significantly. Without their primary long-range threat, Sarah's forces could begin maneuvering more aggressively to eliminate the remaining enemy positions and secure the convoy route. The firefight intensified as more enemy positions revealed themselves along the ridgeline. Sarah realized they were facing a much larger force than initially detected. The hostile fighters had been well prepared and disciplined enough to maintain concealment until the convoy was completely committed to the kill zone. "Alpha Leader, this is Overwatch 2, came a new voice over the radio. "We're taking heavy fire from positions we can't see from our current location. Request permission to relocate." Sarah analyzed the tactical situation rapidly. Her Overwatch teams were being engaged by enemy forces that had been positioned specifically to target her security elements. It was a well-planned ambush that demonstrated significant tactical sophistication. Negative Overwatch 2. Maintain position and continue suppressing targets. I'm moving to provide additional support. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible to anyone who remembered her early struggles with marksmanship. She was going to leave the relative safety of the convoy position and move to an exposed location where she could engage the enemy forces directly. "Rodriguez, take command of the convoy security," Sarah ordered her second-in-command. "I'm moving to that rocky outcrop to provide precision fire support." "Sergeant, that position is completely exposed," Rodriguez protested. "You'll be taking fire from multiple directions." "That's exactly why I need to go there," Sarah replied. "It's the only angle where I can see all the enemy positions and coordinate our response effectively." Sarah gathered her precision rifle and additional ammunition, then began moving toward the exposed position she had identified. The rocky outcrop provided an elevated firing position with clear lines of sight to the enemy ridge, but it also made her visible to hostile forces from multiple directions. As she moved across the open ground, bullets began impacting around her position. The enemy had clearly identified her movement and were concentrating fire to prevent her from reaching the strategic position. Sarah used every bit of cover available, moving in short rushes between protective terrain features. "Alpha Leader is taking heavy fire," Johnson reported from his Overwatch position. "I can see multiple muzzle flashes targeting her position." "Cover me," Sarah transmitted as she made the final sprint to the rocky outcrop. "I need 30 seconds to get established." Johnson and his spotter immediately began engaging the enemy shooters who were targeting Sarah's movement. Their precise fire forced several hostile gunmen to take cover, reducing the volume of fire directed at Sarah's position. Sarah reached the outcrop and immediately began setting up her shooting position. The elevated location provided her with a commanding view of the entire battlefield, allowing her to see enemy positions that were hidden from her other units. It was exactly the kind of situation her countless hours of extra practice had prepared her for. Through her rifle scope, Sarah could see at least 12 enemy fighters positioned along the ridgeline. Most were armed with assault rifles, but she could identify 2 additional crew-served weapons that posed significant threats to her convoy. The tactical situation required precise, rapid engagement of multiple targets under extreme pressure. "All units, this is Alpha Leader. I have visual on the entire enemy position. Stand by for target designation." Sarah's first shot eliminated an enemy fighter who was operating a radio, disrupting their ability to coordinate their attack. Her second shot took out a gunman who was preparing to fire a rocket-propelled grenade at one of the convoy vehicles. "Overwatch 1, enemy sniper in the rocks at your 2 o'clock, Sarah transmitted while engaging her third target. "He's been trying to get a shot at your position." Johnson shifted his aim to the position Sarah had indicated and eliminated the threat with a single shot. The coordination between Sarah's elevated position and her Overwatch teams was proving devastatingly effective against the enemy forces, but Sarah's exposed position was drawing increasing attention from the hostile fighters. Her rocky outcrop was taking sustained fire from multiple directions, with bullets impacting the stones around her and forcing her to move constantly to avoid being hit. "Alpha Leader, you need to get out of there," Rodriguez transmitted urgently. The enemy is flanking your position from the east. Sarah could see the flanking movement Rodriguez had identified. A group of enemy fighters was moving along a concealed route that would allow them to attack her position from the side. Once they reached their objective, her current location would become untenable. I see them, Sarah replied calmly. Give me 2 more minutes to eliminate the remaining crew-served weapons. Those 2 minutes felt like hours as Sarah engaged the most dangerous enemy positions while simultaneously avoiding the increasing volume of fire directed at her location. Her shooting had to be perfect. There was no margin for error when every second increased the danger to both herself and the convoy. Sarah's rifle cracked repeatedly as she systematically eliminated the remaining heavy weapons positions. Each shot required precise calculation of distance, wind conditions, and target movement. The pressure was immense, but her years of disciplined practice had prepared her for exactly this moment. Last heavy weapon eliminated, Sarah transmitted. All remaining targets are small arms only. The destruction of the enemy's heavy weapons fundamentally changed the tactical balance of the engagement. Without their crew-served weapons, the hostile forces lost their ability to threaten the convoy vehicles effectively. Sarah's other units could now maneuver more aggressively to eliminate the remaining scattered enemy positions. Outstanding shooting, Sergeant, Johnson transmitted. I count at least 8 confirmed kills from your position alone. But the flanking force was getting closer to Sarah's position, and she knew she needed to move immediately. The enemy fighters had closed to within 200 meters of her rocky outcrop and would soon have direct fire angles that would make her position impossible to hold. All units, I'm displacing from current position, Sarah transmitted while gathering her equipment. Continue engaging targets of opportunity. Sarah began her movement back toward the convoy, but the open ground that she had crossed earlier was now completely covered by enemy fire. The hostile forces had adjusted their positions during the engagement, creating overlapping fields of fire that made movement extremely dangerous. Alpha Leader, you've got at least 3 shooters covering your route back, Rodriguez reported. We're putting down suppressive fire, but it's not enough to guarantee safe passage. Sarah assessed her options quickly. The flanking force would reach her current position within minutes. But the direct route back to the convoy was essentially a death trap. She needed to find an alternative route that would allow her to rejoin her unit while avoiding the concentrated enemy fire. Johnson, can you see the drainage ditch that runs along the base of the ridge? Sarah asked over the radio. Affirmative, Alpha Leader. It looks like it connects to your position and runs most of the way back to the convoy. That's my route out. I need you to keep those shooters focused on the direct path while I move through the ditch. Copy that. We'll make them think you're coming straight back. Johnson and Rodriguez immediately began engaging the enemy positions that covered the direct route, forcing the hostile shooters to take cover and return fire in their direction. The diversion created the opportunity Sarah needed to begin her movement through the concealed drainage ditch. The ditch was partially filled with loose rocks and debris, making movement difficult and noisy. Sarah had to crawl on her hands and knees while carrying her rifle and equipment. But the depression in the ground provided essential cover from enemy observation and fire. As she moved through the ditch, Sarah could hear the continuing firefight above her. Her units were maintaining steady pressure on the enemy positions, preventing them from repositioning to search for her alternative route. The coordination and discipline her soldiers were displaying filled her with professional pride. Alpha Leader, the flanking force has reached your old position, Johnson reported. They're searching the area, but it looks like they think you're still somewhere in those rocks. Sarah's deception was working perfectly. The enemy fighters were wasting time and exposing themselves while searching for a target that was no longer there. Her overwatch teams were able to engage several of them while they were focused on the wrong location. The drainage ditch brought Sarah to within 50 meters of the convoy position, but the final approach still required crossing open ground under potential enemy observation. She waited for the right moment when her unit's suppressive fire was at its heaviest, then made a rapid sprint to rejoin her forces. Welcome back, Sergeant, Rodriguez said with obvious relief as Sarah slid into cover behind one of the convoy vehicles. That was some impressive shooting up there. Sarah immediately began assessing the tactical situation and reorganizing her forces for the next phase of the engagement. The enemy had lost most of their heavy weapons and taken significant casualties, but scattered hostile fighters were still active along the ridge line. Status report from all units. Sarah transmitted. "I need current ammunition counts and casualty reports." The responses confirmed what Sarah had hoped. Her forces had suffered only minor injuries while inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. The combination of superior marksmanship, tactical coordination, and disciplined fire control had given them a decisive advantage despite being caught in a well-planned ambush. "Air support inbound in 15 minutes, came the report from higher headquarters. "Can you maintain your current positions until then?" Sarah looked at the remaining enemy activity and assessed her unit's capabilities. The hostile forces were disorganized and had lost their most dangerous weapons. Her soldiers had proven they could handle whatever resistance remained. "Affirmative, we can hold this position," Sarah replied. "Enemy forces are significantly degraded and no longer pose a major threat to the convoy." The remainder of the engagement was essentially a cleanup operation as Sarah's forces systematically eliminated the scattered enemy positions. Johnson and his spotter continued to provide precision fire support, while the other units maneuvered to clear the ridgeline of remaining hostile fighters. When the air support arrived, there were only a few enemy positions left to neutralize. Sarah coordinated the final strikes while ensuring her own forces were clear of the target areas. The engagement concluded with complete mission success. The convoy was secure, the route was cleared, and the enemy force had been eliminated. As the convoy resumed its movement toward the destination village, Sarah reflected on how far she had traveled from those early days on the firing range. The same determination that had driven her to seek extra shooting practice had carried her through one of the most challenging tactical situations of her career. Johnson approached her as they prepared to continue the mission. "Sergeant, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Back in basic training, I was wrong about your abilities. What you did today was exceptional leadership and marksmanship." Sarah nodded, accepting the acknowledgement gracefully. "We all had a lot to learn back then, Johnson. Today you proved that your shooting skills are every bit as good as you claimed they were." The convoy reached its destination without further incident, delivering the humanitarian supplies to civilians who desperately needed them. For Sarah, it was a reminder of why she had joined the military in the first place, to serve others and make a positive difference in the world. 6 months after the convoy ambush, Sarah found herself back at Fort Jackson as a senior instructor in the Advanced Marksmanship program. Her combat experience and exceptional shooting skills had earned her a coveted assignment training the next generation of military sharpshooters. The same firing range where she had once struggled to hit targets now served as her classroom. The irony wasn't lost on her as she prepared for her first day as an instructor. She was standing in the exact spot where Sergeant Williams had once corrected her shooting stance and taught her the fundamentals that would eventually save lives in combat. Now she would be the one passing those crucial skills to new soldiers. Her first class consisted of 12 experienced soldiers who had been selected for advanced marksmanship training. Unlike the basic training recruits she had once served with, these were seasoned veterans who had already proven themselves in various military specialties. They were here to develop the precision shooting skills needed for special operations and critical missions. "Good morning, soldiers," Sarah began as the class assembled on the firing line. "I'm Sergeant First Class Martinez, and I'll be your primary instructor for this course. Over the next 8 weeks, we're going to transform you from good shooters into precision marksmen." She paused to study the faces in front of her, recognizing the mixture of confidence and curiosity that characterized experienced soldiers facing a new challenge. Several of them were clearly wondering what this relatively young woman could teach them about shooting. "Before we begin, I want each of you to demonstrate your current skill level," Sarah continued. "This isn't a test or evaluation, it's simply a baseline, so I can tailor the instruction to your individual needs." The first soldier to step forward was Staff Sergeant Collins, a combat veteran with multiple deployments who had served as a designated marksman in his infantry unit. His confident demeanor and precise movements suggested extensive experience with precision weapons. Collins took his shooting position with practiced efficiency and began engaging targets at various distances. His shooting was solid and consistent, achieving hits on all targets within acceptable parameters. It was exactly the kind of performance Sarah expected from an experienced soldier. "Excellent fundamentals, Collins," Sarah observed as he completed the exercise. "Your shooting is technically sound and would be effective in most combat situations." Collins nodded, clearly pleased with the assessment. "Thank you, Sergeant. I've been shooting competitively since I was assigned as a designated marksman. However, Sarah continued, I noticed that your breathing pattern changed when you transitioned to longer-range targets. Under stress, that inconsistency could affect your precision when it matters most. Collins looked slightly surprised by the detailed observation. Most instructors would have simply noted that his shots hit the targets without analyzing the subtle, technical details that could impact performance under extreme conditions. Sarah had developed an eye for these minute details during her own journey from struggling recruit to expert marksman. She understood that precision shooting was as much about mental discipline and technical consistency as it was about natural ability or extensive practice. The next soldier, Corporal Williams, had been a machine gunner in an armor unit and was transitioning to precision shooting for the first time. His approach was more tentative than Collins, but Sarah could see potential in his careful attention to detail and methodical preparation. Williams's shooting was less consistent than Collins, with several shots falling outside the optimal scoring zones. However, Sarah noticed that his errors followed a pattern that suggested correctable technical issues rather than fundamental problems with his shooting ability. Williams, your trigger control is excellent, Sarah noted. The issue is in your sight alignment. You're consistently placing the front sight slightly high and the rear sight notch. It's a minor adjustment that will significantly improve your accuracy. Over the course of the morning, Sarah evaluated each soldier's shooting and identified specific areas for improvement. Her ability to diagnose technical problems and suggest targeted corrections impressed the experienced soldiers, who began to realize that their new instructor possessed exceptional knowledge and teaching skills. During the lunch break, several soldiers gathered to discuss their morning experience. Collins, who had initially been skeptical about learning from such a young instructor, found himself reassessing his assumptions. Did you notice how she spotted my breathing issue? Collins asked the group. I've been shooting for years and no one ever identified that pattern before. She caught problems I didn't even know I had, Williams added. I've been fighting that sight alignment issue for months without realizing what was causing it. When the afternoon session began, Sarah introduced advanced techniques that went far beyond basic marksmanship. She demonstrated shooting from unconventional positions, engaging targets at extreme ranges, and maintaining accuracy under simulated stress conditions. Precision shooting in combat is completely different from range shooting, Sarah explained, as she set up a complex training scenario. You'll be tired, stressed, possibly injured, and operating under time pressure. Your techniques need to work under those conditions, not just when you're comfortable and relaxed. She had designed training exercises based on her actual combat experience, creating scenarios that replicated the physical and mental challenges her students would face in real operations. The training was demanding and realistic in ways that impressed even the most experienced soldiers. Today we're going to practice shooting after physical exertion, Sarah announced. You'll complete an obstacle course while carrying full combat gear, then immediately transition to precision shooting at varying distances. The exercise was similar to the one Sarah had faced during her own basic training, but far more challenging and realistic. The targets were smaller, the distances greater, and the physical demands more intense than anything the soldiers had experienced in previous training. Collins was the first to attempt the exercise, attacking the obstacle course with the same aggressive energy he brought to all challenges. When he reached the shooting station, he was breathing heavily and clearly fatigued from the physical demands. His first shot missed the target completely, sailing high and to the right. The second shot was closer but still outside the scoring zone. By his third shot, Collins had managed to control his breathing somewhat and achieved a marginal hit. Frustrating, isn't it? Sarah observed as Collins completed the exercise with a score well below his morning performance. Combat doesn't wait for you to catch your breath or get comfortable. She then demonstrated the same exercise herself, moving through the obstacle course with efficient, controlled movements that conserved energy while maintaining speed. At the shooting station, her breathing was elevated but controlled and her shooting position was established quickly and precisely. Sarah's first shot hit the center of the target despite her physical exertion. Her subsequent shots grouped tightly around the center, demonstrating the kind of consistency that the soldiers were striving to achieve. It was a masterful display of the techniques she was teaching. The key is energy management and breathing control, Sarah explained as she finished the demonstration. Physical fitness is important, but technique and mental discipline are what allow you to maintain precision under stress. The soldiers spent the remainder of the afternoon practicing the exercise while Sarah provided individual coaching and corrections. Her teaching methods were patient but demanding, pushing each soldier to achieve higher standards while providing the technical knowledge they needed to succeed. By the end of the day, every soldier in the class had improved their performance significantly. More importantly, they had gained respect for their instructor's expertise and teaching ability. Sarah had successfully established herself as a credible leader who could help them develop the advanced skills they needed. As the soldiers prepared to leave for the day, Collins approached Sarah with a question that had been bothering him since the morning session. "Sergeant Martinez, can I ask how you developed such detailed knowledge of precision shooting techniques? Your analysis of shooting errors is incredibly precise." Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey from struggling recruit to expert instructor. "I started as the worst shooter in my basic training class, Collins. I had to learn every technique the hard way through countless hours of practice and study. That experience taught me to recognize problems that many people miss." Collins looked surprised by her admission. "You were a poor shooter initially? That's hard to believe based on what we saw today." "Determination and proper instruction can overcome almost any initial disadvantage," Sarah replied. "The key is being willing to acknowledge your weaknesses and work systematically to correct them." 5 years later, Master Sergeant Sarah Martinez stood before a packed auditorium at the Army War College, delivering a keynote address on leadership development and overcoming adversity. Her journey from struggling recruit to decorated combat veteran and respected instructor had become a case study taught throughout the military education system. The audience consisted of senior officers, experienced non-commissioned officers, and promising junior leaders who had gathered to learn from her experiences. Many had heard stories about her transformation from the worst shooter in basic training to one of the Army's premier marksmanship instructors, but few knew the complete details of her remarkable journey. "Leadership isn't about starting with natural advantages," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the large auditorium. "It's about recognizing your weaknesses, seeking the help you need, and never accepting that good enough is actually good enough." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which showed a photograph of herself during basic training. The image captured her looking uncertain and overwhelmed, struggling with a rifle that seemed too large for her small frame. The contrast with the confident woman now addressing the audience was dramatic and immediately compelling. "This photograph was taken during my 3rd week of basic training," Sarah continued. "At that point, I had missed more targets than I had hit, and my drill sergeants were beginning to wonder if I belonged in the military at all." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Many of the officers present had read Sarah's military record, which included multiple commendations for marksmanship excellence and combat leadership. The idea that she had once struggled with basic shooting skills seemed almost impossible to believe. Other recruits in my training company had started calling me college girl because they assumed I was too soft and academic for military service, Sarah said with a slight smile. They weren't entirely wrong. I had joined the Army to pay for my education, not because I had dreamed of being a soldier since childhood. She advanced to the next slide, which showed her current marksmanship certifications and instructor qualifications. The list was impressive, including advanced sniper training, competition shooting awards, and specialized instructor certifications that represented years of dedicated professional development. "The transformation you see here didn't happen overnight," Sarah explained. "It required acknowledging that I needed help, finding a mentor who was willing to invest in my development, and committing to deliberate practice every single day for months." She told the story of approaching Sergeant Williams for additional training, emphasizing how difficult it had been to admit her weaknesses publicly and ask for help. Many military leaders struggled with similar challenges, preferring to hide their deficiencies rather than seeking the assistance they needed to improve. Sergeant Williams could have dismissed my request or simply gone through the motions of providing minimal additional instruction, Sarah continued. Instead, he saw potential that I didn't even know I possessed and invested his personal time in developing that potential. The audience listened intently as Sarah described her months of extra practice sessions, the gradual improvement in her shooting skills, and the growing confidence that came with demonstrated competence. Her story resonated with many of the officers present, who remembered their own early struggles with various military skills. The real test of my development came 2 years later during a combat deployment, Sarah said, advancing to a slide that showed a map of the area where her convoy had been ambushed. My unit was escorting a humanitarian supply convoy through territory where previous missions had been attacked. She described the ambush in tactical detail, explaining how her years of extra practice and dedicated study had prepared her for the complex shooting challenges she faced during the engagement. The audience of experienced military leaders could appreciate the technical difficulty of the shots she had made under extreme stress and time pressure. During that engagement, I was responsible for eliminating multiple enemy positions at long range while under direct fire, Sarah continued. The same shooting skills that had once been my greatest weakness became the tools that saved the lives of my soldiers and ensured mission success. The irony of her transformation wasn't lost on the audience. Several officers exchanged meaningful glances as they considered the implications of Sarah's story for their own leadership, challenges and development, opportunities. But the most important lesson from that day wasn't about marksmanship, Sarah said, her tone becoming more serious. It was about the soldiers under my command who had once mocked my abilities but now trusted me with their lives. Leadership credibility isn't inherited or assumed. It's earned through demonstrated competence and genuine care for those you serve. She told the audience about Johnson's apology after the engagement and how their relationship had evolved from antagonistic rivalry to mutual professional respect. The transformation of their dynamic illustrated how authentic leadership could overcome even the most challenging interpersonal obstacles. Private Johnson, who had been my harshest critic during basic training, became one of my most trusted soldiers, Sarah explained. He learned that leadership potential can emerge from unexpected places. And I learned that earning respect requires proving yourself through actions rather than demanding it through authority. The presentation continued with Sarah discussing her transition to instructor duties and the satisfaction she found in developing the next generation of military marksmen. She emphasized how her early struggles had made her a better teacher, allowing her to identify and correct problems that other instructors might miss. My experience as a struggling student made me more effective as an instructor, Sarah noted. I understand the frustration and self-doubt that comes with learning difficult skills, and I can provide the kind of patient, detailed instruction that I needed during my own development. She shared several examples of students she had taught who overcame significant initial challenges to become excellent marksmen. Each story reinforced the central theme that determination and proper instruction could overcome almost any obstacle to professional development. The students who struggle the most initially often become the most dedicated and successful in the long term, Sarah observed. They understand the value of the skills they're developing because they had to work so hard to acquire them. As her presentation neared its conclusion, Sarah reflected on the broader lessons that military leaders could draw from her experience. Her journey illustrated principles that applied far beyond marksmanship training to virtually any aspect of professional development. Excellence isn't about starting with natural advantages, Sarah concluded. It's about identifying areas where you need to improve, seeking the help and instruction you need, and committing to deliberate practice over extended periods. Most importantly, it's about never accepting that your current limitations define your future potential. The applause that followed was sustained and enthusiastic. Many of the officers present were already thinking about how they could apply Sarah's lessons to their own leadership challenges and development goals. During the question and answer session that followed, several audience members asked about specific aspects of her journey. One colonel wanted to know how she had maintained motivation during the months of extra practice, when improvement seemed slow and uncertain. The key was focusing on small, measurable improvements rather than dramatic transformations, Sarah replied. Every day that I hit one more target than the previous day was a victory worth celebrating. Progress doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. A major asked about her advice for leaders who were struggling with skills that seemed fundamental to their military specialties. Sarah's response emphasized the importance of seeking help early, rather than hoping that problems would resolve themselves over time. Pride is often the biggest obstacle to improvement, Sarah noted. The sooner you admit that you need help and actively seek that help, the sooner you can begin developing the competence that builds genuine confidence. As the event concluded, and the audience began to disperse, many officers approached Sarah individually to thank her for sharing her story. Several mentioned that her presentation had inspired them to reconsider their own approaches to professional development and leadership challenges. Walking across the War College campus after her presentation, Sarah reflected on how far her journey had taken her from those early days of struggling with basic marksmanship. The scared recruit who had once been mocked by her peers had become a respected leader whose story inspired others to overcome their own obstacles. The transformation had required years of dedicated effort, countless hours of practice, and the willingness to admit weaknesses and seek help when needed. But the results had exceeded even her most optimistic expectations, proving that determination and proper instruction could indeed overcome any initial disadvantage. Most importantly, Sarah had learned that true leadership meant using her own experiences to help others achieve their potential. Whether teaching marksmanship to advanced students or sharing her story with senior leaders, her greatest satisfaction came from knowing that her journey could inspire others to pursue their own paths of growth and development.